Okay. All right. Oh, that's really loud today. We'll call the meeting the order of the, call to order the meeting of the Planning Commission for the City of Oregon City, May 22nd, 2023. We'll call staff call the roll, please.
Commissioner LaSalle.
Here.
Commissioner Staggs.
Here.
Commissioner West is excused. Commissioner Laws.
Here.
Commissioner Espy.
Hi.
Vice Chair Schlagenhofer.
Here.
Chair Stoll.
Here. Microphones are a little loud today. Do we have any public comments for items not on the agenda? All right, we'll move on to the public hearing. Read the script. Public hearings on land use applications are scheduled for tonight. I feel like I can't get far enough away from that mic. Our role is to conduct the public hearing and to make decisions about the matter before us. In making those decisions, we must apply the applicable codes and laws and cannot vary from or change those laws or codes. A staff report has been prepared for each application and has been made available to the public 7 days before the first public hearing. The staff report identifies the approval criteria that apply to each applicant's proposal. Staff has analyzed the criteria which are contained in the staff report. The hearing procedure that the Planning Commission will follow is set out in the state law and the Oregon City Municipal Code. The hearing procedure steps are shown on the Planning Commission website. Public testimony will be called on in the order it was requested. If you wish to testify in person, please fill out a speaker card available at the back of the room. If you wish to testify virtually, you will be called either from a request to speak email to city staff at planning@orcity.org in advance of this meeting, or by raising your virtual or physical hand when I ask if there are others in the audience who would like to participate. For the public record, please begin all testimony stating your name and city of residence. If you would like to receive a copy of the notice of decision, please state your mailing address or email address. Testimony and evidence should be directed toward the applicable approval criteria. If you believe other criteria apply in addition to those addressed in the staff report, identify and discuss those criteria and explain how and why you believe they apply to the application under consideration. Any person may submit written material while the public record is open on each application. Any written materials received by the city staff during the time period in which the record is open will be placed in the record. Written materials submitted during the public hearing must be presented to the city staff in order to become part of the record. If a person intends for PowerPoint presentations, reports, pictures, or other exhibits used in their oral testimony to be placed in the record, copies must be submitted to the city staff while the record is open. If they are not given to staff, they will not be included in the record. Any person wishing a continuance to present additional evidence and testimony or to keep the record open to respond to new evidence must make that request before the public testimony portion of the initial hearing is closed. If the Planning Commission makes a decision with which you disagree, any issue that you may wish to appeal must have been raised before the Planning Commission in order to be considered by the City Commission and, in the event of further appeal, to the Land Use Board of Appeals. Without raising the issue on the record with sufficient detail and accompanied by statements or evidence allowing the city and all parties to respond, the issue will not be considered on appeal. In addition to participating orally or in writing and raising all issues during the Planning Commission proceeding, the filing of an appeals must include the required fee. A city-recognized neighborhood association may request waiver of an appeal fee subject to the requirements set forth in City Code. In addition, the failure of an applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient detail to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Now we will open the record for Oregon City file number GLUA 23-00006, General Land Use Application, SP 23-00016, Site Plan and Design Review, VAR 23-00001, Variance, and PARK 23-00001, Parking Adjustment for new construction located at 1689 Malala Avenue. Members of the Planning Commission are to be unbiased. As a result, I will call on each commissioner to disclose any potential conflicts, such as family, financial, or business relationships with any of the applicants, or with regard to the land in question. I will also ask whether any of the Planning Commissioners have discussed the application in question with any of the parties, or have independent knowledge of relevant facts, such as from a visit to the site in question. Any member of the audience may question any Planning Commissioner about their disclosures. At this point, does any commissioner have any conflicts of interest, ex parte contact, bias, or other statement to declare, or have visited the site? If there was a site visit, the Planning Commission must declare what he or she perceived. We'll start off with Commissioner Laws online.
I have no ex parte contact. I have not visited the site. I do drive past it, and I do bank work for an employer who banks at Wells Fargo, so I do deposits right around there. So that's it.
Okay. Commissioner LaSalle?
I have no ex parte contact, bias, or financial interest in the matter.
Commissioner Staggs?
I have no ex parte contact, no conflict of interest, and I have not been to the site.
Vice Chair Schlagenhofer?
No conflicts of interest, no ex parte contact, no bias. I didn't visit the site specifically for looking at it, but I've looked at it hundreds of times over the years. I've been all around the building. I know the site real well. I understand the parking is shared with other businesses in the area. So I know it well, but I didn't visit it specifically for this application.
Commissioner Espy?
No conflicts or bias.
All right, and I have no conflicts, no ex parte contact, no bias. I have visited the site during its previous occupancy, but not specifically for this hearing. All right, does anyone in the audience wish to question any of the planning commissioners about these disclosures? No. All right, we will now commence with the staff report.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Good evening. My name is Molly Gorin. I'm the planner representing staff tonight for tonight's hearing item, GLUA 2306 Chase Bank Site Plan and Design Review, variance for building entrance design and parking adjustment. Okay, there we go. So this land use proposal is comprised of 3 land use application types. First, the site plan and design review application is typically reviewed at a staff level and has been reviewed against the applicable criteria in the Oregon City Municipal Code. As found in the staff report, those findings can be found in the staff report. Planning staff finds that the proposal meets or will meet with the conditions of approval, the standards for site plan and design review. However, this application also includes a request for a variance to the proposed building orientation, and it also includes a request for an adjustment to the maximum parking standards, which are both reviewed at the Planning Commission level. The options for tonight's Planning Commission decision include to approve the application, to deny the application and provide staff with supplemental findings, or to continue the application to date certain and obtain the needed 120-day waiver from the applicant. The subject property for this proposal is at 1689 Molalla Avenue. It's within the commercial zoning district, and the site area is just over half an acre at 24,441 square feet, more or less. The proposal submitted is for the demolition of the existing building and a new bank building, approximately 3,500 square feet in size. They also propose to reconfigure the parking lot and provide additional landscaping, irrigation, and lighting to the site. The proposal requires a Planning Commission decision due to the variance to building orientation standards and adjustment to parking. For background on the variance, as part of the site plan and design review, the proposal is reviewed for compliance against the standards for within Chapter 1762 of the code. The applicant seeks a variance to one of these standards for building orientation. This standard requires that institutional, office, multifamily, retail, and commercial buildings orient the most architecturally significant side towards the street, and that there shall be a primary functional entrance on that street frontage. The functional primary entrance shall also be clearly defined and recessed or framed by sheltering element as part of that standard. And the general purpose of this standard is to ensure that buildings are pedestrian-oriented and safely accessible from the public sidewalk. The proposed building provided elevations that show the west elevation facing Molalla and the north elevation facing the parking lot are of similar architectural significance. The elevation facing the street frontage does have the required primary functional building entrance. For the applicant to meet standards, they have the option of submitting an alternative building design as approved by planning staff that orients the most architecturally significant facade towards Molalla Avenue, or rather they may obtain a planning commission variance. So a variance may be granted when these conditions exist, that the variance from the requirement is not likely to cause substantial damage to adjacent properties, that the request is the minimum variance that would alleviate the hardship, that granting the variance will equal or exceed the purpose of the regulation being modified, any impacts resulting from the adjustment are mitigated, that no practical alternatives have been identified which would accomplish the same purpose and not require a variance, and the variance conforms to the comprehensive plan and the intent of the ordinance being varied. So in reviewing these criteria, staff recommendation and findings include that the proposed design appears to equal or exceed the purpose of the building orientation regulations, with both facades including significant architectural features and double door entrances, as well as a canopy. The applicant's provided justification for the variance includes design constraints caused by the drive-through aisle that will be part of the building, which is required to be to the side or to the rear of the building, and a slight elevation change between the public sidewalk and that building entrance along Molalla. The variance request does not conflict with OC 2040, nor with the intent of the ordinance, which again is to assure that buildings are pedestrian oriented and safely accessible from the public sidewalk. So staff recommends to the Planning Commission to approve the application with the variance to building orientation standards. Moving on to the parking adjustment request. For background, the OCMC Chapter 1752 includes parking minimums and maximums. There is a process built into code that allows applicants to request adjustment to these parking standards by Planning Commission. For this subject site and the proposed use of a bank, the code would allow a maximum of 16 parking stalls for this proposal, which would include any ADA parking. I might be stuck. The existing site currently exceeds this number and has 17 stalls. The applicant hasn't identified that the parking projected to be needed by staff and clients exceeds the maximum allowed parking, and they are requesting 24 parking stalls in total. On the left, we have an existing conditions map. You can see that they're doing some reconfiguration of the parking lot, including moving the aisle to behind the building. However, the ingress and egress to the site are more or less remaining the same. The proposed parking lot on the right shows 18 standard stalls, 4 compact stalls, and 2 ADA stalls for a total of 24. And so the total adjustment would be 6 additional stalls to the maximum parking. To meet code, the applicant shall either submit an alternative parking design that complies with the maximum parking standards for the proposed use and building, or obtain a Planning Commission adjustment to the maximum parking standards. So here we have the criteria for a parking adjustment, which includes providing adequate documentation that the individual project requires the amount of parking being requested, a parking analysis for surrounding uses and on-street parking availability, that the function and the use of the site, sorry, I can't read that part. That the function and the use of the site with the reduced parking spaces will not significantly impact, oh, okay, I messed that up, sorry. The applicant shall demonstrate that modifying the amount of required parking spaces will not significantly impact the use or function of the site. Got there? Okay. Compatibility, the proposal is compatible with the character scale and existing or planned uses of the surrounding neighborhood. Safety, that the proposal does not significantly impact the safety of the properties or rights of way, and that public services will not be impeded. So in looking at these standards, staff found that for documentation, the applicant did provide details on parking demand. This was based on typical branches for JP Morgan Chase banks. The provided narrative stated that the demand at peak times of the day for customer parking is around 20 stalls, which did not include staff parking requirements. For parking analysis for surrounding uses and on-street parking availability, because the site has been unoccupied, it would have been difficult or impossible for the applicant to do an on-site parking study for the proposed use. So overall, this criteria, we found this to be not quite applicable. We did note that there are about 6 parking stalls within 600 feet of the site of on-street parking. For function and use of the site, the proposed development would provide a decrease to the impervious surface area of the site through a reduced building footprint and by meeting the current landscape standards. The applicant provided a detailed estimate of customer and staff usage of the building and parking lot. And additionally, no public comments identifying that the project would significantly impact use or function were submitted at the writing of this report. And this area off Malala includes several parking lots for businesses. Excuse me. For compatibility, the area includes several parking lots for businesses located on Malala Avenue, so the proposed parking lot would be consistent with the neighborhood's character scale and uses overall. And in addressing safety and services, the parking lot is designed in conformance with our city standards for turning, maneuvering, and egress routes. Public notice was provided as required, and no comments identifying concerns to impacts of public service or safety were received. And the applicant is required to comply with Oregon Fire Code through a separate review process by submitting a fire access water supply plan to Clackamas Fire District. So based on those findings for the variance request and the parking adjustment request, staff is recommending the Planning Commission approve files GLUA 23-00006, SP 23-00016, VAR 23-00001, and Park 23-00001. And I can take any questions you may have.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? We'll start with Commissioner Laws online. She's still there.
I don't have any questions at the moment. I think pretty much everything for me is straightforward. So I've looked through all the paperwork, so.
Okay. I'll start to the right. Commissioner LaSalle?
No question.
No questions? Commissioner Staggs?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Vice Chair Schlagenhofer?
I have a simple one. As far as needing the variance for the orientation of the building, I noticed that it wasn't the length of the building, it was the architecturally significant side, and it was the most architecturally significant side. needs to face the street, but how is that determined?
That's a good question. It does have some limited amount of discretion. There isn't exactly a list of, in that code section related to that. We mostly looked at the canopy elements on both sides. A sheltering element is required as part of that standard. And it was provided on both sides. One side is a bit longer. We also looked at the amount of glass provided and the amount of articulation and in recession and projection of the building sides.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Espy?
So I was just curious how the reciprocal parking agreements figure into the meeting of the minimum and maximum parking standards.
That's a good question.
Because you guys have a lot of them. I know that this city has a lot of them, and you're probably going to run into that a lot when you're trying to make findings for this.
When it comes to minimum parking standards, we do accept shared parking or a business to lease parking spaces from another business to meet that standard. However, it's not really taken into account in terms of maximum parking standards, at least not in the code.
Okay, thanks.
All right, I don't have any questions, so applicant like to do a presentation, if they're online or in person?
I'm here, but I
Good, if you could just say it on the speaker on record. All right. Yeah, no worries.
Chuck Doherty from PM Design Group. I don't have any questions or presentation.
Okay. Okay. Do any of the commissioners have any questions for the applicant? No? All right. Thank you. We'll move on to public comments. We have one. William Gifford. Come up, state your name, city residence, and you have 3 minutes.
Good evening, Commissioner Stoll, our Chair Stoll, and Commissioners. My name is William Gifford, and I live in Oregon City. I'm also the Land Use Chair for the Hillendale Neighborhood Association, in which this proposed project is cited. And we met with the architects virtually several weeks ago at one of our executive meetings. We had good attendance and asked a lot of questions, got a lot of good answers. Feel really comfortable with this design. It'll be a nice asset to our neighborhood, to our city, in fact. I also spoke with Molly on the phone about this and have a deeper understanding of what the issues were, and we have absolutely no objections whatsoever to this. I have a couple of personal questions about why is the city even involved in this? I mean, parking, and if they have too many, well, I'm really happy to see successful businesses. As the director of the Oregon City Business Alliance, I think we really should be doing everything we possibly can to facilitate the location of new businesses in our city. And if that brings jobs and other good things with it, yee-hoo. So, but the Neighborhood Association has no objections whatsoever to either of these variances.
All right, thank you. And applicant, you have the opportunity to rebut the comments if you like. Fair enough, all right. All right, so we'll close the public record. Okay, we'll close the public record and move on to deliberation and a motion.
I wish all the applications were this straightforward and easy and well done, so I have no problem with it. Unless anybody else has anything to add, I would make a motion to approve it with conditions.
I would second that motion.
Okay, Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? No? All right, call the vote, please.
Commissioner LaSalle, Commissioner Staggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Laws,
Aye.
Commissioner Espy,
Aye.
Vice Chair Schlagenhofer,
Aye.
Chair Stoll.
Aye. Motion passes. All right, we'll move on to meeting minutes. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for your time this evening. Planning Commission meeting minutes. Any staff report?
I do not have a staff report. I think this is our last batch, though. Our last big batch.
Okay. All right. Any motions?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Call the vote, please.
Commissioner LaSalle,
Aye.
Commissioner Staggs,
Aye.
Commissioner Laws,
Aye.
Commissioner Espy,
Aye.
Vice Chair Schlagenhofer,
Aye.
Chair Stoll.
Aye. All right, motion passes, and moving on to communications.
The only communication I have is that we will have a meeting on June 12th, our next regular meeting. So at this point in time, we have an item scheduled for that night.
Okay. And I will unfortunately have to miss that meeting, so Vice Chair Schlagenhofer will be back in the hot seat. Any communications from other commissioners? No? All right, meeting's adjourned.